All right. Good morning, or good afternoon, depending on where you are. Welcome, everybody, to our conversation about TNTP's talent framework. We are really excited to share this with you all today. Before we get started, my name is Alex Podbelski, and I'm a director here at TNTP who has contributed to the development of this tool we will share and talk with you about this afternoon. A few logistics, please use the Q&A function on your Zoom panel so that you are able to share questions, comments, anything you would like to hear more about. We will be monitoring questions throughout, and we'll have space in this presentation for lots of Q&A, so please do use that feature. I will now pass it to our wonderful facilitator today, Jamila Newman, who will get us started. Jamila, I will hand it over to you.
Thank you so much, Alex, and thank you to each of you for attending today's conversation. I know anytime folks take a little time out of their schedule to be on a webinar or be on a call, is just time well spent, and hopefully we'll be able to have a rich conversation today to get us going. As a part of our conversation, and just for orientation purposes and logistics, we are definitely comfortable with people coming off mute as we talk today and sharing any questions that they may have, putting those in the Q&A chat as well, and Alex, Erica, and other members of our team will flag those for me. But just so that everyone does know, we will be reserving time at the very end of this conversation, as Alex mentioned, for a more in-depth Q&A conversation. But should I say anything that you just want to pause in the moment, we'll answer those questions as they come, or let you know that we'll be answering them soon throughout the presentation. So we started with just this quick reflection question of, like, how does your current talent strategy support your vision for students? What are the strengths and where are you seeing opportunities? And if you can just take a minute and within chat, just drop any quick reflections that you have to this starting prompt, and then we'll go ahead and get started. So if you can just capture or have that on your side, and as you're thinking today, this is actually the question that we're going to keep coming back to, because really the work that we're trying to do and what we're really calling for in our talent model, or the new model that we have for thinking about workforce, is that your talent strategy should be ever increasingly, or as tight as possible, or as proximate as possible to your vision for students. And what we've actually found through our work in the field is that quite often these two worlds are becoming further and further apart. And so the work that we have and that we're really calling for is what it will really require to bring these two things into the same ecosystem and into the same field of play. So today's conversation is really going to be about designing the workforce of tomorrow to support all students in learning, a real new model for student-centered instructional delivery. As Alex said, my name is Jamila Newman. I am the Vice President of our Services Learning and Design Department. This is our the SLD, or Services Learning and Design Department, is our group of content and subject matter experts who build our internal and external resources, the tools that our consultants and clients use to kind of actualize the vision and outcomes that we often articulate and see coming up in evidence-based best practice. And as I said, I'm so excited to be here to talk to you today. If you have never really heard of TNTP or don't know what we do, or have maybe only heard of a small section about what we do, We're a national nonprofit education consulting firm, and many of you may know us from kind of the research or white papers that we often write that really highlight both the successes, but also the challenges that are often plaguing the education field. What probably separates us from most providers in the research space is that we take it a step further. We don't just kind of rest on our research, which we're very proud of. We actually use our work with consultants in the field to really work with our clients on how to change the reality, especially if they're experiencing challenges and barriers. And this work happens, of course, at the classroom level with classroom teachers and educators, but it also happens at schools with instructional leadership teams, at the district level with superintendents and C-suite or executive directors. And it also happens in the communities with partners, both our funding partners, but also parents, caregivers, key stakeholders, policymakers, et cetera. And so TNTP really is trying to make an effort that really supports the entire vertical spine on managing the change that we think matters most for students and the student experience. So in terms of how we'll spend our time today, we're really going to start by talking a little bit about why we think it's important right now to rethink our approach to talent and why we think we need to really do something different. Then we're going to spend time talking about what that difference is, what shift are we calling for people to make, and what it could look like in the field. We'll also give you a little information of some tools that we've already shared with you and that we'll be sharing with you to kind of help you take this thinking further, as well as some of the services that we've been providing thus far to clients interested in doing this work. And then, as I shared before, we'll end with some time, some more in-depth Q&A time. So just to get us started, we really are calling for, at this particular moment, a new model for talent and workforce design that really starts by having a clear articulated vision for the student experience within client and client communities and student needs. And the why behind this particular moment is many of the headlines that you've already seen. And if you're like me, they often keep you up at night. So we know that many public schools are losing students. We are not having as many children. Our birth rate is down. So we literally have fewer kids in communities. Our teachers are experiencing burnout, particularly our teachers of color, whose communities were often hardest hit from the COVID-19 pandemic. We're seeing COVID-19 funding. We're all anticipating kind of the fiscal cliff that will happen as ESSER funding and COVID-19 funding comes to an end. And we just have a lot of people across systems wondering if they'll get fired, what are the implications of kind of anti-racism or anti-CRT approaches and mechanisms that are playing out in board buildings and policy-led legislation buildings across the country. And then we just have lots of school closures that are occurring. We knew as an organization that although so much of our work historically really started within talent, and we do have a wellspring of resources that can help with the traditional standard mechanisms that we know matter most when it comes to talent, we knew we had to kind of call out and call for a new way of thinking about talent. And we knew that it couldn't be kind of a one-size-fits-all magic bullet approach to talent. We had to have an approach that really calls on people to think differently. We are seeing that more teachers report more than ever that they're planning to leave the profession. And we're having fewer teachers enter the profession, which is only exacerbating many of the challenges that these headlines called out. And although our talent strategy isn't particularly centered uniquely and only on teachers, we know that when we have lower numbers of teachers entering the force, that will eventually impact the number of coaching candidates we have, the number of principal candidates we have, the number of superintendent candidates or chief academic officers. So it is a trickle-down approach. or trickle up approach, that if it's not impacting your more senior level positions today, it will tomorrow. So in our conversation today, when we talk about workforce strategy, this is not only about bringing in more teachers to your system. It's actually encouraging you to think holistically about your entire workforce. And when we actually dig in and look at some of the numbers that we're seeing when we look at and survey educators and teachers, many of them are saying the percent of educators who say the stress and disappointments of their job just simply aren't worth it. This is consistently going down, as I said, not just for teachers, but also for our senior leaders. And we know the stress of the pandemic and the amount of effort that managing through the pandemic had on our system leaders as well as our teachers was profound enough that we have to change our approach in the way that we're working as we move forward. And so while these headlines are dire and the statistics that we see are dire, we at TNTP truly see this as a window of opportunity for us to begin doing the work that we've actually desired for a number of years, that really is about knitting together our talent and academic strategies to ultimately improve and impact the teacher, student, family, and community experience. And so we're going to talk a little bit today about what that means and what that looks like. And as I said, if you came onto the call and you're like, oh my gosh, Jamila and TNTP are going to give me this one size fits all magic bullet approach to thinking about my workforce that is going to bring thousands of new teachers through the door. This is really not that conversation. I hope I don't immediately see thousands of people drop off this call. But this is actually about thinking holistically, because what we're recognizing is that in the past, we might have put all of our eggs in the teacher evaluation basket, or put all of our eggs in the new pipelines or pathways basket, or the grow your own basket. And what we're finding is that the unique nature of today really doesn't allow for us to chase one thing. It is going to be a holistic approach that's really guided by the needs of your community and the needs of your system. So let's talk about if we're trying to first really center what kind of experience we want for kids, first and foremost in this conversation, we wanted to give a little insight into what kind of student experience should we be striving for, and therefore really aligning our talent strategy to. So when we talk about the student experience, rather than just kind of limiting students' access to opportunities, we're looking for conditions and practices that really foster agency and momentum for kids and our children in the community. Rather than really short-sighted learning experiences and opportunities oh, right now, tech is a boom. So therefore, we're going to train generations of kids only in tech and coding. We're doing some future-proof learning experiences and thinking, and really forecasting along down the line to understand not just what's possible today, but what's possible tomorrow, and ensuring that our learning experiences are setting students up for that. We're really thinking rather than anchoring our instruction to below grade level work that is an attempt to kind of recover lost learning or lost skills, we're really calling on a diverse and variegated group of educators to set high expectations for students and to foster learning experiences that really ready students for competitive post-secondary opportunities, be they college or career. And then we want to ensure that we're not pushing students to simply fit in, meaning changing or relinquishing who they are or their heritage or their families, but that we're creating and fostering environments that really affirm students. They're inclusive, they foster a sense of belonging, they're supportive cultures that really allow students to access racially and linguistically diverse set of educators, as well as learning experiences that really celebrate the differences in who our students and who the members of our student communities are. So if we, in a very generic nutshell, this is the type of student experience that we're trying to do and trying to cultivate. And so that's really what needs to guide the work that we're thinking about when it comes to our talent workforce. Now, many of you are probably already familiar with our 6 levers framework that we introduced as a part of our learning acceleration white paper. And when we talk about our talent framework, what we're really trying to do is understand the 2 levers that are highlighted here in darker blue, the vision for excellent instruction in the student experience, and this workforce experience selection, support, collaboration, and design. What we're really asking for systems and system communities to do is to first begin by asking themselves, what is it we're trying to do for students? What is the experience, both instructionally as well as qualitatively, that we're trying to foster for students? And what type of workforce do we need to make that happen? That seems like an obvious set of questions that we would ask, have systems ask. But what we often see happening is the academic department goes off and does a secluded retreat somewhere and paints a picture of a beautiful vision for kids. And the HR department goes off and in a secluded retreat somewhere and looks at all the spreadsheets and numbers and thinks about all the vacancies that may be happening across the district, who's retiring, who's coming from education, local education preparation programs, et cetera. And HR creates an initiative to fill those vacancies. Academics creates a strategy to mobilize their vision. And at some point in the spring, the fall, the autumn, they come together and HR says, oh my gosh, we've filled all your vacancies. In some magical world, as a former system leader, I know people are like, yeah, we've filled all your vacancies, we've hired every teacher. And then academics begins to look at the teachers that have been hired and they're like, oh, wow, we've hired a lot of teachers who potentially have never taught with high quality instructional materials. We've hired a lot of teachers who don't fully understand the science of reading. And they go back to this beautiful academic vision that they've articulated, and they begin to lose faith in their ability to realize it. And because of that, the student experience is grossly altered within that system because HR or human resources, human capital, and academics were not talking and communicating to each other along the way. What are we trying to do with kids? And therefore, what type of workforce will we need to make that happen? Or what workforce do we already have or know that we have in order to realize the vision that we currently are articulating for kids? So our framework really is a mechanism for helping systems think through that work and lessen the gap between our human capital teams and our academic teams. And so this framework is what we call our 7P talent framework. And we're going to take this kind of row by row to help us really understand each of them in a little bit more detail with a little bit more guidance as we go. So if we start with this idea of using data to understand, we think before we begin even strategizing, a system should have a very clear vision for what they're trying to accomplish, either holistically across the vision, across the system, holistically across the system in terms of their instructional program, or if they have a particular initiative within a content area or grade level, what are we trying to do? What are we trying to accomplish? And what is the data currently telling us? And what we mean by that is once you have a sense of your data, you need to figure out your prioritization and your personnel. What assets do your students and your staff already bring within your system to really help you realize that vision? And what personnel might you need and do you already have to help you realize this vision? And so this is really intended to be kind of a landscape audit of like, what is the reality? Who are our kids? What do our kids need? Who are our adults? What do our adults need? You should have that as a guiding principle that anchors your strategy moving forward. Once you have clarity on who you have and what you need, the next row is really about what we call our 3 core pillars. And you need to be thinking about, do I need pathways to enter? Do I need more people coming into my system? Or do I need people with a specific set of skills coming into my system? Then you need to be thinking about the right workload. What's the lane and the role that I need everyone in my system to play when it comes to this particular vision that we have for students? And then this final piece of who do I need to retain and how do I go about retaining them, given what I'm trying to accomplish with my students? So for every single initiative, once you've gotten clarity on who and what is in your system, you're thinking about who do I need to bring in? What role do I need what role or expectations do I need to hold for them? And how do I retain the right people given the vision that I have for students? We have pioneering here running across the bottom because what we are seeing is that in systems that are really thinking outside the box when it comes to these 3 elements, their pathways for entering, really thinking about the roles or job descriptions for each of their positions, and thinking outside the box in terms of retention and creating kind of new innovative models for each of these 3 things. Those have been the systems that have been most readily able to navigate the hardships that we've seen kind of come about because of COVID, as well as even pre-COVID, kind of the challenges that often face and plague educational systems. So we really think that this is not just always about doing kind of the standard approach to building a pipeline or a grow your own tool or the standard approach to retention. It's really understanding the context and the motivations of the people within your community and creating innovative models that really speak to what is going to galvanize and invest the people who are most proximate to this change management effort. The final phase of this strategy and framework building concept is implementation considerations. And this is an area that we so often don't see our systems and our clients really capitalizing on. So what we recognize is that through the COVID pandemic, and even before, most often when we have developed workforce and academic strategies, it is nearly impossible for a system to be able to actualize the vision of their strategy alone. And what we mean by that is being able to use the capacity, the budget, the personnel that your system has. Quite often, what is required is partnership of some way, shape, or form with people outside of your system. But what we often see happening is that systems haven't in advance strategically thought about, given what I'm trying to accomplish with students academically or instructionally, given what I now know about my talent needs, who do I need to strategically partner with, and what do I need that partner to do within my system, and how do I put kind of parameters and barriers around what that partner is doing and how they execute within my system. And so what instead we see is either academics, again, having a strategy about like, this is what we want to accomplish, or HR having a strategy about this is what we want to accomplish, and not having done that forecasting or forethought about what they need from partners. And so a partner or provider like TNTP comes along and you like us and we're great, and you say, okay, come in and support us. But there may, in some instances, if you don't have an organization like TNTP that recognizes the importance of coherence and alignment, you might find yourself working with a partner who is leading your organization, your system, your grade level, your content leaders in a completely different direction than what you intended, or using resources that don't really align to either your talent vision or your academic vision. So within this structure, it's important to really get clear on what do we need our partners to do, in what ways, for how long, with whom, and what are the objectives that we need them to accomplish, and that we're going to hold that partner responsible for accomplishing. That's important work that you would want to really refine and understand as part of your strategy and framework building. The second thing is that it's important that you step back in this process and really understand the policies within your context that either accelerate or act as barriers to what you're either trying to accomplish from a talent perspective or from an academics perspective. So, for example, if you have a vision for literacy instruction and you've articulated a 5-year vision for literacy, but you live in a state like Tennessee where all third graders have to be proficient by third grade, it is not going to behoove you to set goals where you say only 50% of our third graders are proficient in literacy, which may seem really ambitious if you are at 15% proficient right now. That is a set in stone policy that must inform your academics and must then inform your talent strategy moving forward. But you can also use policies to help you really understand what are an additional layer of supports that we may get. So again, in Tennessee, because of policies that are in place from the state, systems get access to high quality instructional materials. They can opt in to training on the science of reading, etc. And how are then you leveraging and using these things to propel your academic and talent strategy? And then the final piece is permission, which may seem like a very strange P, but what we've often found is that leaders, educators, etc., often need permission to do the things that they instinctually know might serve their campus or their school or their system. And what I mean by this is this structure is really calling for leaders, and both at the district level as well as at the school level, to think adaptively about their talent and academic structures and strategies. And sometimes principals believe, like, if this is the expectation of what teachers did 2 days or 2 years or even 20 years ago, I have got to maintain that expectation for how I'm using my teachers today. Even if that principal or leader knows I need teachers who can do X, Y, or Z. I need teachers who can not only teach core instruction, but I also need them to be my first tier tutors. Or I need coaches who can not only coach teachers, but can also step in and help with tier 2 intervention services. So sometimes it's important that our districts give people permission to do the things that they need to in terms of who is going to own, manage, give input on the work. How are we going to really build awareness or help people identify their specific needs? And so that is the work that we really do with our systems in building this strategy, is taking them through this 7P process so that at the end of the day, we start with their academic vision and then help them figure out what is the kind of workforce that you'll need to realize that vision. But we want to just zoom in a little bit on this middle tier because the middle tier of pathways, workload, and reasons to say, because we believe that in all of your change management efforts when it comes to talent, you need to be thinking about these three things consistently across all areas. And again, what we've found in the past is that we've had systems and clients who may call us in to say, you know, Jamila, I really need some help on cultivating a grow your own pipeline for new principals. But they don't then do that exercise of thinking about, like, what is the role and the job of a principal? Like, what is your vision for the lane and the return on investment that you want all of your principals or school leaders to be able to do? How are you thinking about retention? How might this impact retention? It is important that you're thinking about that holistically across the board. And again, that you're pressure testing this idea of pioneering. What needs to be different? What needs to be innovative? How might you really maximize and utilize this design? What we really think is the game changer about taking this approach, and particularly about starting with understand, is so often understanding the data is so often what we're finding is that clients may call us in for one thing. They may say, oh my gosh, I've got huge teacher vacancies and I've got a teacher shortage issue. And in fact, we were able to do just such a contract really recently, where one of our clients and partners called us in and they were sure that the issue that they had was teacher shortage. Like, I just simply don't have enough teachers to cover the positions that I need. And once we did this analysis with them and this audit of what's happening in their system, what we found is they don't have a teacher shortage issue. They have a teacher absentee issue. And we could have, and that system could have, been spending all of their time and strategy around an initiative that may have filled vacancies, but because they hadn't done that work of really understanding, like, why aren't teachers coming to school, they could have hired 20 new teachers who could have still been absent for 60% of the days that they needed them to. So really, this work is about kind of understanding what's really happening at your system and not putting energy or time around things that may not actually resolve the workforce or academic issues that you're facing. Additionally, what we're finding through this approach, as opposed to just kind of going in and saying, like, I want to do the random, like, grow your own, this is the hot new thing that I've heard everyone is doing when it comes to talent, and doing this, like, thoughtful pause and really understanding each of these P's and having an approach for each of these P's when it comes to workforce design, is that we often also find that there are opportunities to work with the capacity that you currently have. So once we have designed or helped our systems really articulate what they're trying to have happen academically, it's then about sitting back, and before we rush to, like, oh my God, I've got to hire all of these new coaches, or I need to have 40 new high dosage tutoring people, we do an audit of the capacity that we have and really then start thinking about, like, does this require hiring new people, or is it more a matter of using the people that we have in a very different way and refining the work that we're doing by helping teachers, leaders, educators, office staff members recognize, here's the stuff that you can actually stop doing because it's not a priority for our academic or instructional program, and this is the stuff that I need you doing instead. That has been really helpful work for our clients, because for so often, the way that we have operated educationally is, anytime there is a new initiative, it often means we have to have a new set of folks that we're hiring for or looking for, that puts so much pressure on the system. And so this is really about having that adaptability and flexibility. to know what matters most. This is also a continuation of the coherence work that we've also already put out. We've called on and highlighted the importance of instructional coherence from an academic perspective, but this is also about getting coherence at the district level between departments. And what we're finding is just as coherent and lack of coherence is detrimental for students at the classroom level, incoherence between our HR departments and academic departments at the district level is also equally detrimental to students at the classroom level. When we don't have these two departments speaking to each other, understanding the needs of each other, we often find ourselves getting building a workforce that in no way, shape, or form is prepared to move the district forward in the way that's articulated in the academic vision. And if those two departments and systems aren't finding ways to talk together and be together throughout the hiring season and process, then what we've often find is that systems never fully realize the vision that they've articulated academically or instructionally. I want to pause here before we actually move on and see if people have ideas or thoughts about when you think of these three pillars, bringing people into your system, getting really clear with the right workload for your system, and the final idea of ensuring that you have really thoughtful reasons to stay or retention. Which of these three core pillar areas are kind of most pressing or top of mind for you right now? And there's a panel or poll that just came up on your screen that you can just quickly vote and we can see where people land. Alex, are you seeing the poll on your side?
Yes, responses are still coming in. I'll give us another few seconds.
Okay, great.
If you haven't responded yet, please do so now. All right, I will share our results.
All right, so a lot of you are mentioning and talking about right workload and reasons to stay. And we're seeing that in a lot of our places. And this is an example of what we're talking about in terms of oftentimes reasons to stay is inextricably linked to the right workload of like, I'm being asked to do a lot. This is becoming overwhelming. It's becoming stressful. And so if you aren't kind of thinking about all three of these pillars and all three of these pillars at the same time, you can find yourself kind of setting up an initiative that's very short-sighted in terms of the approach that you think that you want to take. Alex, did you want to come up and say anything else about the poll and the poll results?
No, unless any of our participants want to raise their hand and come off mute and add any thoughts, you're welcome to do so now. Otherwise, we can keep going.
I don't know if we had any hand raises. All right. So one of the things that as you're listening and paying attention and following along, and we actually got this as a question that someone sent prior to the webinar. When we think about these 7 pillars, we are encouraging people to really take into account not only kind of the social cultural context of their system and their system community. Who are your students? What are your students' needs? Who are your faculty and staff? What are their needs? What is the social cultural context of your community? What jobs are available? What career opportunities are available? what state post-secondary opportunities in terms of college are available to students, and are we readying the students for those career and college opportunities. But it's also about taking into account the evidence base of the field, and that evidence base and that social cultural context must inform the priorities and strategies that you push forward, and must be a backdrop to every single one of the 7 pillars and the thinking and the work that is done around those 7 pillars as you move forward. And so what may not come out really clearly here is, and a good example of what we're talking about here is, like, the research is inextricably clear about the benefits of having teachers who share the race or ethnicity or the identity affinities of our students, and the outcomes that accelerates for students when it comes to what they're able to do, not only during their pre-K through 12 experience, but even further beyond. Although we know that that is an incredible factor and so critical to so many students, we still continue to see numbers like these, where we have 49% of our students within our pre-K through 12 system are students of color, but only 18% are actually teachers of color. This is an example where we're not living into what the data says. And so I'm also equally recognizing, as an African-American woman leading this conversation, that the achievement gap is very real for individuals who look like me and may have had some of the social cultural experiences that I have had. And that because of that realness, their ability to have and meet the criteria for being a teacher is often challenging, either praxis tests or bachelor's degrees or et cetera, or having access and opportunities to getting into the teaching field are often real barriers for people who look like our students. And so this is an example of when you get into pathway building programs or reasons to stay, you have to take into account the evidence and the research base, as well as the reality, and recognizing that you may have to have pioneering, innovative solutions to begin to close this gap or to realize this gap for your students. But we can't continue to ignore the evidence base and pretend like we don't know it. So as we're talking about and exploring this idea of building a strategy that is most proximate to academics, both on the academic side as well as on the talent and workforce management and strategy design side, we have to really adhere to, understand, and appreciate the evidence base and the research base, and ensure that our initiatives and our practices and the goals that we set align to what we know is best practice for kids and the student community. So that really means and looks like delivering on our vision for students and ensuring that our strategies, our priorities, and our initiatives affirm and respect and support both educators of color, but also our students of color and the differences that they may bring into our systems and into our system communities. It looks like we had either a participant raise their hand or something in chat, but I can't see what that question was.
Yes, we did get a question, which was, can you share more about how to facilitate a capacity audit?
Yes. And by capacity audit, just to clarify what we typically mean by that is when I'm going to use literacy instruction for example. So prior to taking on my current role, I was a partner in our organization and I worked throughout the Southeast. And so a few years ago, many of our Southeast partners were adopting high quality instructional materials, most notably literacy instruction. And that was an initiative that they were running. And so we know in terms of doing literacy instruction, and let's take K2 literacy as an example, we know that that requires a few things. When we're talking about high quality literacy instruction, that means that K2 students have access to high quality instructional materials that allow them to build their foundational literacy skills, as well as to have meaningful practice with complex text, typically through read alouds that their teachers are doing. So when we talk about kind of the capacity needs of a system, first, we would need high quality instructional materials is a good example. Second, we would need teachers who kind of understand what high quality K-2 literacy instruction looks like, and looks like in theory as well as looks like in practice. We need teachers who can utilize high quality instructional materials and kind of recognize their educative structure or components. Like high quality instructional materials should help teachers kind of understand where to spend the bulk of their time. And they should kind of know best practices when it comes to either leading or instructing in foundational skills, or doing the work of complex text read alouds, et cetera. So a system might do one of two things. We could look at like evaluations, principal information to say, of the teachers that you currently have within K-2, how many of them are meeting expectations when it comes to your evaluation? But we could also do things like diagnostics in the classroom. When we go into the classroom, based off of what we currently see, how many of your teachers are executing foundational skills lessons appropriately, meaning they are explicit, they are systematically led. Students are getting an opportunity to read, write, and speak within the foundational skills. Teachers are articulating the foundational skills sounds appropriately, et cetera. They're making connections between the sounds that students are learning and the reading that students are doing. We could look at that from a diagnostic perspective. We could also do focus groups where we intentionally ask teachers, when you think about high quality literacy instruction, what would you articulate are the key components? We've also done like assessments where we do as a part of PD, where we ask as a pre-test or post-test some form of questions that get at, do people kind of understand what high quality K-2 instruction looks like or sounds like, et cetera. We could do observations where people have videos and they observe a classroom and kind of rate it, and we see how accurate was their rating of if this is high quality instruction. But we have kind of lots of dipsticks and opportunities to assess what is the knowledge base of the people on your campus. And based off of that, we could say, do we need to bring people in to fill any gaps that we see in knowledge? Do we need to build skill, meaning in reasons to stay or retention? A lot of the work is not just on like compensation and things like that. We also know from research that a lot of it is like, am I getting the support and coaching and training that I need? So do we need to bring people in? Do we need to train our people differently? Or do we need to partner with folks who, if our coaches don't have the skill set yet built, or our leaders don't have the skill set yet built to train our people up, do we need to partner with someone to do that training for us? Or do we need to partner with someone to do a specific element of instruction for students for us? But it all depends on what that capacity audit could look like. It could look like observations. It could look like looking at evaluation materials. It could look at like focus groups. It could look like surveys. It could look like an old school Scantron assessment, or it could be a host or a number of those things with multiple points of entry. So you're not kind of like putting all of your eggs in one basket to understand the capacity that you currently have. And then it's also doing just a vacancy audit, like, are all of your classrooms currently filled, or do you actually not have any certified teachers in any of your K-2 positions, which in some cases we've also found, and like, what will that mean and what does that look like? I see another question came up.
I think that was the only question.
Okay. All right, but keep those coming. And again, feel free to come off mute if something happens, if you have a question in the beginning. So just to give you a quick highlight of what this looks like, but although we have services that kind of align to each row of the framework, we did want to highlight particularly for the things that everyone did a poll on, some of the services and the work that we do, particular to the 3 pillars at the center of our framework. So for Pathways to Enter, as I already mentioned, we do diagnostic work to really help people identify opportunities, how to strengthen their pipelines and practices, and kind of remove any barriers that they may not have been aware of for people kind of entering or expressing interest in pipeline programs. We help people actually like build and lead the pipelines themselves and kind of do some train the trainer support, where we start where maybe TNTP is taking on the lion's share of the activities. Eventually it gets to like where it's a little bit of we do, we're working elbow to elbow and side by side, and then you do on your own, where we're giving you kind of guided feedback so that you can kind of sustain that pipeline work on your own. And then just staffing services, generally giving you best practices and systems for improving things like recruitment, hiring, selection, training, etc. We also do a lot of like right workload services and work. So again, a lot of our services start with some type of understand, engage analysis. So you'll see diagnostics showing up multiple times because we're an organization that believes that we shouldn't just like jump in with work until we really understand what's happening in the first place, so that we can be as strategic and as possible, and that it actually aligns to what's happening in your community and system. We also do just a lot of leadership and teacher development and coaching, because as we say, we know from the research that a lot of what influences people to stay or to feel like their work is manageable is getting the support and coaching that they need around the things that they're held accountable to. We do then also a lot of staffing services. So creating really efficient, effective staffing models. A lot of people reached out to us, obviously, during the pandemic, and they're like, I got to figure out this hybrid teaching approach, or I've got to do simulcasting. But we really encourage people to still use those same innovative practices, even now that things are starting to normalize somewhat, and encouraging to lean into ideas of like, okay, I don't have as many high quality teachers as I expected. Could I do a structure or a model where one teacher is doing the delivery of the instruction we have, and we're using other staff members to support with like the guided practice or the independent practice time, and what might that look like? So some systems call us in to really help them with new models design. And then, like I said, for reasons to stay, educator development services, policy and advocacy services, but also helping with like compensation services. So for example, I did some work in Mississippi leading a contract where we helped that system really audit their compensation, analyze local compensation context and competitor salaries, and then come up with a new compensation model that really put them in a position to be a more competitive system in school for assistant principals and principals. So those are some examples of kind of the how practitioner work that we do in the field with our clients, beyond helping on the strategic advisory and just like having a more comprehensive vision for the work that you're trying to do and the workforce that you're trying to build. I want to just end with another plug. I know there is anxiousness and anxiety potentially about simply filling the vacancies that we have. And I know that many of us may be really thirsty for the new next thing that is going to have like en masse people just coming through the door. And that just doesn't happen. It's not happening anymore. And we need to get out of that line because we're waiting on something to show up that simply is not occurring in our systems anymore. And while we could, as an organization, show up and say, like, we're going to help you recruit, and we could come in and write a contract and write a proposal with you that helps you get like the 15 teachers that you have as a vacancy, what that often means from the whole is you're you're borrowing from Peter to pay Paul. We're taking teachers from one system and just doing a passing back and forth between one school or another district. But as a whole, we're still running into the same problem because we haven't stopped and stepped back and said, we can't keep on with the same structure of believing that the schools of tomorrow will be these one-to-one teacher classroom designs, or one leader to one school designs, or whatever it might be. We've got to really step back and think about something different. So this 7P approach is really about designing a nimble talent workforce strategy, instead of waiting on the exceptional, or instead of waiting on that magic bullet, and building a system that really promotes and is ready for the flexibility, adaptability, and agility that really we believe will prepare us for the schools and educational institutions of tomorrow. And so we just wanted to highlight that again. And I know that this may be difficult for folks to be like, oh no, it really is about strategic design and contextualizing what's happening within your district or system, and being thoughtful about what is it that you actually need and what is really happening and what are you really trying to accomplish, and using that as momentum for your talent and workforce strategy. We just want to end with a quick reflection question, and again would encourage people to either come off mute or share their reflections in the Q&A of how is this approach similar to or different from how you're currently thinking about talent strategy, and thinking back to your opening reflections, how could this potentially make that alignment conversation that you were thinking about earlier even stronger between your talent strategy and your vision for students? If you could just share your reflections and thoughts in Q&A, or if you're willing to raise your hand, we'll call on you and you can come off mute and share as well. See one person in the Q&A. I really appreciate that. You guys are so lucky because I can't see your faces because I am a notorious cold caller. But it doesn't look like anyone has any Q&A reflections, but Diana, I did see your thoughts. Good to hear from you out there. Diana and I worked together a long time ago. But if we don't have anything else, I just want to move us ahead to the last part, and then we'll jump into just open Q&A where we can get a little wild and just see what questions people have, just to make sure people have a sense of the types of things that we can do just in short order form. We do a lot of advising, giving feedback and guidance on strategies that you're thinking about, helping you kind of understand the national context for how those things have played out, and even connecting you with networks of systems who are potentially trying similar strategies. That's one of the things we do. We also do and can help you do the work. So provides capacity to accomplish key tasks if you just need an extra set of hands, or extra brains, or extra facilitators in your system. That is some of the work that we do both on the talent as well as academic side. We also do leading, so helping to lead work where you're designing and implementing a new teacher residency program. Again, like if you're doing pipeline building, grow your owns for teachers, leaders, etc. We can both help you design and implement that work, or lead it for you for a few years until you feel like you're in a place to be able to sustainably do that work on your own. And then obviously building capacity. Our goal is to put ourselves out of business within your district. So building capacity to the point where you can actually sustain the initiatives and the work structures, conditions, and strategies that we help you devise both academically and talent-wise while we're on your campus. Just to make sure everyone's on the same page of some of the things that you've already received or that you will be receiving, we can also send them to you again if you are someone who's just like told to join today's call. We've sent a few things. So first, to help you just get started, we've developed and shared a talent framework guide that contains more details about the 7P process and resources for really how to implement and think through this work on your own within your own district or system. If this is something that you want to kind of start and prime the pump with your leaders, leaders and hiring managers for, you'll also receive a guide to some short-term strategies. We recognize that some of the things that that may be called out as you really start interrogating your system are things that may take a year or two to really get up and running. So we wanted to give you kind of some ideas of things that you can do immediately to start living into the framework that we talked about today. So that will be coming to you post this call as a way for you to just have that in your back pocket and share with people who weren't able to come. Again, just we really value giving, not hiding anything, open sources. Everybody can have it. Get in there and go crazy. If you're a person like me and need something to do on a wild Friday night, this is what that could be. So we wanted to just share those things with you as potential resources. And again, as a thank you for coming and really leaning into this work. So it is now time for what is perhaps people's most favorite part. If people want to just ask anything that they have questions about when it comes to academics or talent, workforce proximity, and thinking about this framework or strategy that people want to just comment on or share.
And I know go ahead, Jamila.
Yeah, and I know we're a little bit over time. So if folks are already having to run or don't have any questions, you can also reach out and connect with the folks that you see here through our info@tntp.org or send your questions there and we'll be sure to answer them and follow up. So thank you everyone for joining today, and we will just awkwardly linger for a little bit until everyone drops off.